Good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, senior leadership team, and good afternoon to the good citizens of Pelham. We have quorum, so I call to order this special committee of the whole budget open house. Before we pass the agenda, I am told by the clerk that we have two additions to the agenda. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did have a submission by M. Maida with regard to Wayland Heights Park. I understood that she was going to be in attendance. However, her information has been added to the agenda as an addendum. And we also have a motion to suspend the rules and go in closed session, and that is an amendment to the agenda made by Councillor Wink. So you could read that one in for discussion.
Shall we do this one now?
Yes.
Yes. So again, as the clerk has noted, we have a motion put forward by Councillor Wink that the rules of procedure be suspended to allow for the addition of an item to the September 9th, 2019 committee agenda, being an item for closed session. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Then, so adoption of agenda as amended, that the agenda for September 9th, 2019 special meeting of committee to be adopted as amended. All those in favor?
If you could just ensure that that also includes the Wayland Heights presentation.
Oh, okay, and also, as the clerk has indicated, the presentation of Wayland Heights, if the presenter shows. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. After looking at the agenda, does any councillor have any pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none, I instruct the clerk thereof. So we have the 2020 budget presentation, and that will be done by our treasurer, Director of Treasury, Teresa Quinlan.
Mr. Mayor, I'm here tonight to just do a little presentation for our budget open house that we have here. What we have is the 2020 budget schedule, and right now we are doing the first item on the schedule, which is the open house, and this is the opportunity for the public to come here and to tell us what they think should be a priority in our budget. So that's the schedule that was approved by council, and we are right now on target to meet all the timelines. That's what we're working towards. The town's budget is a financial plan that outlines the money the town will raise and spend within the year. It aligns to the town's strategic priorities with the services that are delivered daily to the residents. It directs what infrastructure will be purchased, constructed, and repaired. And we have three types of budgets. The first one is the operating levy budget, and this is the budget that pays for the businesses of the town, including the library. And this includes all programs and services, includes staff to deliver these services, supplies, and repayment of debt for major projects. And this amount is paid by property taxes. We have an operating rate budget. This pays for base services such as water and wastewater treatment, and the costs for these services are charged to the residents based on usage only and not by property taxes. So it's a completely separate budget. And then we have the capital budget, and this is used for long-term investments such as infrastructures and facilities, which are paid off over a period of time. Road repairs and machinery are examples of capital projects. Development charges also contribute to the funding of our growth related to capital projects. So I know we like to show this this slide, and actually we included where do our property taxes go in our tax bills that went out in June, and we actually received a lot of favorable, some positive feedback from the residents saying that it was very helpful for them to understand where our taxes go. So This is the average home value assessment is approximately 348,000, so that means that an annual property taxes is 4,469. And this is based on 2019 assessment and 2019 rates. So the town's portion, based on the average is 1,779, the region's 2,129, and education is 561. And if you look at the diagram here, you'll see the percentages. 12% is education, 48% goes to the region, and 40% to the town. So what's important here is that when we do our operating budget, is that we have to take in consideration the increases that we receive from the region, because it's part of what we collect on behalf of what we collect from the residents on behalf of the region or the school boards. And those are two budgets that we don't control. So the only portion that we do control is the green section there. And for the portion that the town has the tax levy, where is the highest expenditure that we have is in the Public Works Department for the roads, sidewalks, and winter control. So that's the largest department of the town, and it has the highest expenditure. If you look at the region, their highest expenditure pertains to the police services, and that's the largest share that we have, and then we have the school board. So this is something that, this is our second year doing this type of presentation and breakout, and I think that people have found it very helpful. The importance, as I mentioned, of the budget open house is to hear from the residents and businesses of Pelham their priorities for the town for the 2020 budget year, and that's what we're here to do today. So I don't know if there are any questions.
Any questions from councilors? Thank you for your presentation. Oh, wait a minute, Director. Councilor Court?
Yes, in your display, you have a negative $92 for the region. Why would there be a negative revenues of $92?
Okay, go ahead, Charlotte.
I'm sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's their revenues. So the way they present it is they have their revenues in a separate bar, whereas the way we do the town is we offset the revenues against the expenses in each of those areas, so you're seeing the net of each of our departments. So that's their revenue. It moves in the opposite direction from the expenses on the other side.
And court services is a negative too.
That's their revenue. That would be their revenue as well.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, can you give me an example of non-recreation facilities?
This is the town hall, the non-recreation facility, the fire halls. So anything that's not the Meridian Community Center or the swimming pool. The pool is recreation. So I think the recreation is the pool and it's the community center. The rest of the other facilities are non-recreation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move on to the, oh, I'm sorry, yes, indeed, we always have this. Motion put forward by Councilor Kaur. Committee receive the 2020 budget presentation by the treasurer for information. Any further discussion on this? Okay, I'll take a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the presentations and public input regarding the 2020 budget. Request to appear. The first one is the Pelham Public Library Board. I guess you're up next. Oh, so if we could have your name, please.
I'm Donald Brown. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee of the library and vice chair of the board. And this is Amy Gomet, who is the interim CEO of the library. And we are also joined by some board colleagues, including Mr. Tim Wright, who's the chair.
Thank you.
So we're sharing the presentation, and it depends what the topic is, who's speaking, and Amy, you're on.
Okay. I'd just like to thank you to having it so early this year. I didn't have to wear my winter coat for the first time in 6 years to make a budget. It was kinda nice. Okay, so what I would like to start is with the library operating budget priorities, so I can explain what we're looking at for this year. In the past, we had some budget constraints over a few years ago, and we switched Saturday hours to a shared staffing on Saturday hours. So Saturday hours, staff would open up Maple Acre in the morning, then they would close it at noon, and then they would go to Fawn Hill, open it at 1, and stay there till 5. That was a compromise to meet budget constraints many years ago. This summer, we had to cut hours again, so what we did was we looked at what hours in the library system were not being used the most. And what we found was library hours at Maple Acre in the mornings on Saturday were not being used very much. However, it showed that maybe they wanted to use it because what happened was from 9 till 11, hardly anybody used the library, but from 11 till 12, that's when everybody came in. So I think the hours were not ideal for them. However, we couldn't put 2 staffing in. Since they were the lowest hours at that time, we cut hours at Maple Acre. What we'd like to do in 2020, after having done some research and some surveys with the patrons of our library system, we found that Fenwick residents really wanted Saturday hours again. We had over 100 responses, and a majority of Fenwick responses that were in that 100 said Saturday hours were important to them. So I think what it was the hours were not ideal for them, so we should move them to hours in the afternoon, but that would require 2 sets of staff on Saturday. So that's one of our budget priorities, is to restore Saturday hours at Maple Lake Branch. We would love to restore all the hours we have, but we know that's not going to be a reasonable request, so what we want to do is go with the priorities of what the public has asked for us. Our second budget priority would be to replace the aging technology in the library. Technology is very important in the library. It's integral to our services. We have public members use over 3,000 hours of internet service per year just on our computers, not counting the Wi-Fi. So having computers available to the public is very important. We've tried over the years to increase the budget for our computers from $5,000 to $10,000, and it's never been able to happen because every time when we ask for the budget, we don't quite get enough, so that gets cut. Next year, we need to replace the public computers at Fawn Hill. $5,000 is not enough to replace all the computers. They're on operating systems that are outdated. Whenever we do updates, it's touchy whether or not they're actually going to work. They're going to be 6 years old next year, so we do need to replace them. So we need to increase that part of the budget in order to do that. The third item is institute sustainable delivery services for Link. So you might have heard in the media over the spring that the provincial government cut funding by 50% to the Southern Ontario Library Service, which is SOLS. SOLS was responsible for delivery services in Southern Ontario between libraries. So they delivered our books for interlibrary loan, but they also delivered our books for Link, which is the Libraries and Niagara Cooperative. When they cut that service, we lost everything for delivery services. So we now have to institute costs for interlibrary loan. We have to pay for that. We get some reimbursement, but not enough. But the other thing is we get no reimbursement for the loss of delivery services between the Link libraries. So the importance of Link, we have about 30,000 items in Pelham in the library system. Because of Link, your residents have access to over 300,000. So that's a major difference in materials. To keep that service going, the Link CEOs got together and did something that would be just temporary. So what they're doing is we create a central hub, which is actually the Pelham Library, and all the libraries come out and deliver to us, but it's the CEOs driving them in their cars. That's not sustainable, so in the budget for next year, that's why it's our third priority, is to add some money in for that delivery service. The fourth item is expand into e-formats for collection building. As you'll find, our library is quite small. We can't expand our collection in print materials because there's no space. In fact, we're losing space because we have to keep building in accessibility. So we're losing space for our print materials. We need to expand into e-formats more. E-formats is still a small percentage of what we do, but we need to increase that. The reason it's been a small percentage is partly because we've been using platforms that are through consortiums. So they're big, long waiting lists for popular materials. So if somebody wants the e-book, it's much easier for them to get the actual print copy with us than the e-format because it's so much more expensive. I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's about 3 times the price to get an e-format for a library than it is to get a print book. And so in order to expand in that, we do have to expand our budget. The fourth thing is develop makerspaces at both locations. So we've started doing a makerspace at the Maple Acre Library. This is a budget priority. It's not, we're not asking for more money for it though. We've been using grants and charitable funds to do this, and we're going to continue seeking that. We just want to put that as a priority because it's something that we want to expand into Fawn Hill, but we'll continue using charitable funds, fundraising, and grants to do that. And remain vigilant over discretionary budget decisions. This is something we've been doing all along. Last time I met, somebody asked me if we could start thinking outside the box. Well, I'd like to say that we've been doing that all along. If you look at 2009, our library joined into Link. It was just starting. We were actually one of the moving forces towards it. It's what Link did initially was switch from using a bot sponsored vendor sponsored catalog, so where you pay high money for it, to using open source. So in 2009, we were paying about $20,000 to run our ILS system. In 2020, because we're using open source, it costs us $8,000. So we've been saving money in that all along. So that's just an example of how we've been vigilant over discretionary budget decisions.
Okay, the next exhibit we prepared was to look at the history of town grants to the library and compare it to inflation. The top line is where they would have gone over the 6 years at a 2% inflation rate. The bottom line, the red one, is the actual grant we were awarded. So then I did a little comparing. During that same time period, the town tax revenue went up 27%. And the town operating expenses actually went up 19%. And the library and all of that went up about 8%. So we've been falling behind. We're not keeping up. And this is why we have the problems we do with the equipment and with the hours of service. And the hours of service is the critical thing for the public initially, but then the equipment as well. Our share of the tax revenue has actually gone down since 2012, which explains the $60,000 gap there. Actually, if we had kept pace beyond inflation with the way, because things have changed, we would probably be looking at about $130,000 more per year. We did a little survey of the other libraries in the smaller Niagara communities. For 2019, their average ask was a 5.8% increase, and the average award was 5.1. The highest ask and reward was 11.5, and the lowest award, of course, was ours at 0. And one other library got 1.9%, so that was the other low. So that's just, we're trying to put some of our data into a context.
So how has this affected salaries and benefits? Salaries and benefits have increased by 0.7% since 2012. I chose that year because that was a year when we were still staffed at a certain, we had the highest amount of operating hours, and then we've gone up and down over the years since then. So in 2012, we were budgeting $727,000 for staffing and salaries, and in 2019, we're at $732,000. 2019 would be at $135,000, $359,000 if we would gone up 2% each year, which would include things like COLA and grid increases, and maybe even benefit changes. We did do a job equity in 2010. So what we're trying to do is by adding COLA each year is to maintain that job equity, so we don't have to go through that again for much longer. So how has this affected library services for Pelham? Well, Pelham residents have fewer opportunities now to use the library. In 2012, we had 91 operating hours. And as you can see, it keeps going down. It goes up, goes down, goes up, and goes down. But it's still, the trend is to go down. We're at 67 operating hours. So you say, why does staffing cost more per hour now? Because we have slightly higher salaries and benefits, but we have fewer hours. Well, it's because while we're still applying COLA and grid increases, we're not getting funded for those a lot of the times. We've hit or miss whether or not we actually got them. So a lot of times we were given COLA, but not the grid increases, things like that. Also, part-time public desk staff hours increased due to demand. Okay. If you look at this little graph here, in 1999 we circulated 100,000 items at the desk. In 2018 we're circulating 200,000. There was a tipping point in there where we went from 1 staff at the desk to 2, and we never actually got funded for that. We just shifted staffing. But we find now, I found in 2013, we had to shift the staffing to have 2 because people were getting to the point where if they were sick, they wouldn't call in sick, they would come in anyways because the stress of the desk was too much, things like that. And that was not a good culture to have. Also part-time, so that's why they increased, and new tasks and services were added. We keep getting new tasks and services just like everyone else. So things like adding in social media, having a website that offers registration online. For that, you have to put in every online event and put all that information in. That's added staffing time and things like that, and we haven't been able to add those people in. In order to shift staff to doing that, we have to take them off desk. So Maple Acre branch also increased by size by over 300%. Originally, we were a 900 square facility and we had 1 staff member there. Now it's a 4,000 square foot facility and we need 2 staff. We run into issues there where we need to have a backup person. You can't have 1 staff working when you have someone come in who's going to create a disturbance and you have to help them. And you think, well, that doesn't happen too often in Maple Acre. It has happened and you're very isolated out there. Not only that, but if someone has a medical emergency, it's really difficult to have 2 people, not having 2 people to help. You think about maybe having volunteers for something like that, but the problem is with volunteers, you really have to maintain them. So you have people that, if they don't show up, do you not open the building? How do you manage them? And it becomes more of a managing issue, and you have to increase staff for that in order to manage the volunteers.
So as you know, we went into 2019 with a $44,000 problem. That was the increase in our ask for last year, which was not granted. And so that was made up of 4 things which we had reported to you at our last visit. Janitorial services, the cost of living and grid movement, material and purchase costs increase, and a 5,000 reduction in the development charge revenue. And on the right side is how we made that work. We cut 13 operating hours and 19 staff hours. We reduced the materials budget, we reduced the technology spending, limited spending on staff professional development, and limited spending on advertising. Mostly it's the cut in hours that made that work. When we talk about our collection and our materials budget, again, libraries in Southern Ontario in our size range have an average of 7 items per capita, and we have 2. So our request for this year is a total of $877,000. It's an increase of $62,009 over last year, and it's made up of 2 components. And Amy's going to go through the detail of those in just a minute. But it's that catch-up. Some of you may remember when we made that second presentation last year, we said, you know, these things are going to happen again in 2020. We've still got janitorial service, we've got cost of living, so everything that was in that 44 is happening again. And then we have a net increase that we can isolate due to 2020, which consists of some cost increases, but we still have some savings from the hours that we cut in 2019, because we're only restoring, what, about 1/3 of those cut hours for the Maple Acre Saturday mornings.
So what do these increases represent? Well, in 2018, our municipal grant that we received was $814,000. In 2019, we asked for $858,322 in order to deal with the no increase. We still increased the salaries for non-administration, for COLA and grid movement, but then we cut how many staff hours there were by 19, and then we also cut the budget under technology, material purchases, admin costs, and professional development. So So that's how we made the 814,000. What we'd like to do in 2020, if we go over the budget, I went over the priorities earlier, so I won't go into too much detail here, but about 30,000 for salaries would reinstate Saturdays, give the COLA again, and add grid movement. 15,894 would deal with about 15 different line items to do with technology, software support, and a whole bunch of different things that are going up in price, and that we cut. $11,400 would increase for cost of materials. That's where we want to delve into e-formats. We need to delve into e-magazines and e-books for space histories, and also just because that's the trend, that's what people are asking for. This would increase accessibility to our patrons. And then 6,200 would replace interlibrary loan and link delivery costs that were cut by the province. And that gives you to the 877.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest we get the 877. You asked me if I was going to make a suggestion.
Thank
That would move us much closer to that historical inflation line. It wouldn't be there yet, but 2020 would be a much better year for the library than 2019 in terms of cost savings and services. We also did a little study on a per capita basis, and so we're looking for about $50 per capita as the funding that we require. So actually, that's a very small portion of tax revenue. Then we have a capital budget. Now it's going to change a little in terms of the town funding. There's a grant, right? That
Well, we're applying for a grant.
applying for a rather significant grant to work with the town portion of the addition. The library is going to have fundraising, and we have a charitable account now that has some funds in it. One of the things that the renovations and putting in the elevator is going to require a repositioning of a lot of the shelves. And the shelving is 32 years old. In terms of the Accessibility Act, the top shelf is too high and the bottom shelf is too low. And Amy talked to some people about modifying them, and they said it's really not worth it to try. And so we're looking at over a not too long period, really having to replace all the shelving in Font Hill. So that's why that number is so high, the 170,000. The 275, that goes back to, we presented initially in 2017. I think the cost estimate then was 305, and each year we have phoned the consultants, and they have told us, what they think the average cost increase would be. So that's what's brought the total up a little more than we had in 2019. One of the things we would like is to have the mayor and councilors come for a tour of the library during operating hours. We have 4 staff working in the basement right now, and it's not that pleasant. You will see that the CEO's office we presently have is probably less than 100 square feet. We have 3-4 other staff, including Amy, who are sharing about 150 square feet. And then you will see how packed everything else is. So even if we didn't get any more hard copy books right now, when the shelving is all rejigged, the place is still going to be kind of packed out. There are operations that are upstairs now that would be moved downstairs with the renovations. It would bring us closer to, again, the average square feet for libraries in populations our size. I apologize that we seem to have gone quite over our time. you have questions, we'll take questions, but the other thing is if questions come up, if you can get those to Teresa, she can get those to us, if they're detailed kinds of questions.
So before we open it up to council, if I could just ask one question. When you're replacing the technology, being the computers, do you ever, first of all, how many computers are we talking?
7.
Okay. Now, do you,
No, sorry, 8.
when you do that, do you go to other libraries and see if they're replacing computers and try to do a package, something like that? And obviously, perhaps the more, the less?
We haven't done that recently, but we could certainly do that when we go to do it, yeah, definitely. I'd probably put a word out and see if anybody else is doing any.
Exactly, yeah, okay. That's my
The
little
local
suggestion.
CEOs meet quite regularly and
Yes.
discuss matters like that, or if, one of the other things that's going on with the link thing is, not every, we have book clubs that run out of the libraries, but the decision has been made that not every library will buy every set of books that might be needed. So we might have 3 sets, and Fort Erie has 3 other sets, and then at some point during the year, we'll swap them out and still be able to support the book club. So the CEOs are, constantly looking for things like that.
Yes, well, obviously with the, with this new amalgamation, one of the things the provincial government wants everyone to do, not just libraries, but public works, what have you, they want us all to get together and consolidate our purchasing power. So that's what made me think of that as perhaps an option. Yes?
To that, as we move along through the island, through Link, Link has started in 2010 with 5 libraries. We're now at 6 libraries. We have 3 other libraries that want to join us next year. And 2 other libraries, 2 of the big library systems have also joined the open source. They haven't joined Link, but they joined, one joined, uses the same open source we are. Because of what we've been doing, they decided to make that jump. So they come to our IT meetings and we all assist each other on IT matters so that we don't have to outsource it. So we're all kind of, I think we're, by the end of 2021, there'd be maybe 2 libraries in Niagara that are not on this open source. We started with our library system and a few others.
Excellent, excellent. Councilor Wink?
Yes, so I have 3 questions. The first one's very quick. You talked about marker spaces at both locations. Can you explain what
Sure.
they are?
Yep, maker spaces are it's things like 3D printers, green screens, die cutting machines, robotics, things that would empower the individual to go from an active consumer for information to becoming from a passive consumer of information to being an active creator and innovator. So it's things we have machinery and technology that gives kids or adults the opportunity to explore and create and try to understand the technology that they couldn't afford to have in their own homes.
Great, thank you for that. This past year, you lost your CEO and you started a recruitment process and then decided to pull back on that. What are the plans for 2020? Are you looking at a
The
new
first thing
CEO?
we're waiting for the province, because that will depend, what we can do as a course of action. If we're mandated into amalgamation, then we would want to hire a person on contract. My expectation would be in an amalgamation, it's probably wouldn't be effective till January 1 of 2022. So we have a 2-year period there. If amalgamation for some reason doesn't involve us, then we would want to recruit for a full-time CEO. And the problem with not moving on either of those is right now we've got 6 or 7 staff members who are under considerable stress because they've all taken pieces of other people's jobs. And that's how we've got by this year with Amy having some time to do the CEO's job. But unfortunately, we're not getting everything done either. One of the areas, for example, that our former CEO was involved with was community outreach and, being involved with the Lions Club and Rotary Kinsmen, being active, looking for grants, looking for support. We just haven't been able to do that this year.
So regardless of whether you end up getting a new CEO or someone on contract, you're going to have that additional expense.
It's in the budget, yeah.
So
never
it's,
come out of the
it's in this particular budget then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, we used that money this year because we had to change salaries for Amy. For instance, there's a policy about what happens when you're an acting person. And, well, we had, 2 or 3 people that got that. We also had to then hire extra staff on a short-term basis, which they'll be with us till the end of the year. So in a sense, yes, we had that money and we used it to keep things going.
Okay.
Except we didn't have the person.
All right. And my final question has to do with the capital budget. You're looking at improvements of roughly $500,000, of which $275,000 is going to be asked of the town if you don't get the grants. Number one, it's a big ask, but you're not giving us very much detail on what that ask includes. So, what are you looking at? So I'd like to see something a little more robust than just a number and then say, these are the things that we intend on doing as far as our capital improvements.
We have a 37-page report.
Bring it on.
You want it? And it's quite detailed.
Yep.
What we don't have are architectural drawings.
No,
So-
that's fine, but we need some more detail if we're going to be looking at a large capital budget request.
The
like that.
elevator is a big item. And it also requires a lot of, there's only one place in that building that it can go. That's what we've been told.
Yeah.
And that requires a removing of a big workroom that we have, plus moving bookshelves. So that's kind of complicated. And of course, we have staff crowded into the upstairs office and downstairs. We hope to create some more reading carols and open space. But no, we can send over the report to
Great, thank you.
Nancy. And I know that you don't have much of a reading load.
I apologize for not putting more detail in there. We just did it a few months ago, and I wanted to shorten the presentation. So I apologize. We'd be happy to send you, like last time we did pictures of everything that was getting renovated and more description. But I'd happy to send you a summary. Also, I would love to have some council members come out and walk through the building and see, and I can talk about what the renovation would include. Because to see it, you would understand why it's needed.
Thank you, Councilor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Do all the libraries in the municipality work autonomously?
Yes, so each municipality has has their own library services, yes, in Niagara.
Is there any reason for that? And why aren't library services centralized? Like in terms of purchasing e-books and all this stuff online? Like, I don't understand why that's the way it works.
That history changed, I'm not sure, before I got into libraries. So that, in the 90s, it used to be provincially funded, all the libraries, and there was more sharing then. And then it changed, and they changed it, they put the Libraries Act in, and they changed it to, they downloaded the services to municipalities. And when they did that, all the municipalities wanted their own services at that time. I'm not sure the actual history behind whose decision it was or anything, I'm not clear on that. I think amalgamation of the libraries, it would benefit libraries, because you would have less on top. You'd only need one CEO when you combine the libraries. That's the problem, is you have one CEO no matter what size library you have, even if you have a small one. It's in the act, you have to have it, plus it's integral to the library for planning and dealing with the board and getting financial services. But the bigger the library system doesn't mean the more work actually for the CEO. Usually they have more managers below them who do a lot of the work, and they have less work. So the smaller the library, actually, the more work the CEO actually has to do, in my opinion. But if you amalgamate, you actually can save money in that way.
I have another question with regards to revenue.
Sure.
Do you see any of these activities that you're doing, like the Lincoln Net, as revenue generators rather than just expenses?
No, you cannot charge patrons at all. It's in the act for any kind of material exchange. You can't even do it for interlibrary loan. It's funded through the taxpayers. You're not allowed to charge it.
So there's no charges that the library can,
Levy on patrons?
Not
No.
on distribution of materials. You can do it for programming, and you can do it for services like maker spaces and things like that, but you cannot do it for the exchange of books or anything like that.
And do you have a chart for the revenue that you've generated this last year and a breakdown?
Do I have a?
I should have it. We have, a number of revenue sources. There's the book sales twice a year. There are clothing sales. There are trivia nights, euchre nights
For fundraising.
for fundraising. And then our internal revenue really is rentals and fines.
So we get provincial grants and internet reimbursement from the province of about 40,000. Federal grants, we had about 2,000. Fees, fines, and rentals, we had about 37 or 38,000. Fundraising, we did 23,000. And then there's DC funds and transfer from reserve. So after the municipal grant, those are the things.
Thank you for now.
Councilor Court?
Yes, you were talking about computer equipment and being 5 years old. Doesn't it be more feasible to lease equipment from Dell? And this way, Dell will support it. I know a lot of
We
businesses.
used to lease stuff. It actually is more expensive over the long run.
Yeah, but then you don't never have to update. They'll update it for you.
Yeah.
I just wondered if the city, does the town do that? Are we leasing our own
No,
equipment?
we don't.
We own our equipment.
Nope.
And large corporations lease equipment all the time. They don't own the computers. Software support, have you reached out to the town? I know we have one or two experts in software support. We could probably use them.
It's mostly to do with like things like the ILS system and things like that.
Well, no, I was talking more about, you were talking about the Facebook and website, creation of websites and that.
Oh,
I think
yeah, that's
we-
not under software support, that's under staffing.
Staffing,
Yeah.
but instead of going out and hiring somebody, we could probably use our own people to help them.
We've been just
These
using-
are just thoughts,
We've been
that's all.
shifting staff to do it, we haven't actually hired anybody to do that. We just incorporated.
No,
it
because
into
you
our
mentioned
staffing.
it, you just
Yeah.
mentioned that you're putting stress on and people have to do this other work where we could, come to City Hall and some of the experts could do that for you. These are just thoughts, and I'm not saying yes or no. Staffing of one person in a location is against the Labor Act.
Yeah.
We all know that, right? And you can't
We
open it.
don't staff one person.
No, you just mentioned that one person's at a location.
No, that was
where-
Maple Acre years ago.
So there's
Until
always,
the renovation, actually, or the rebuilding of Maple Acre, it was one person.
Yeah. But
that
once
is
we opened the
against
new
the
building,
Labor
we've
Act.
had two all the time.
Okay, there's always two people at the
Always.
location. Okay, it just, I thought I heard you only had one. And how many square feet is the Fawn Hill location?
It's not quite 10,000.
10,000? Thank you.
Any, Councilor Trophy?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Can you tell me how many hours per week the Fawn Hill Library is open and the Fenwick? Each?
Together, there's 67 hours. So Fenwick is open 22 or 24, I'm trying to think. And then Fawn Hill's open 44, 45. It's 67 altogether. I could count it out, but.
We had a little, put in a summertime earlier closure on Thursdays because we weren't getting any library traffic, of course, when the concerts were on. And so we were able to save a couple hours there a week.
And then my next question, can you tell me the number of staff total?
Well, we have 4 full-time, and then I would say 6 part-time, and then 3 students.
3 students? So sorry, through you, Mr. So then,
Part-time, sorry.
7 part-time? So we have 11, we'll say, 4 full-time, 7 part-time, so 11, and 3 students. That makes up to $764,000 in salaries per year?
Yeah, the part-time are at the max part-time. They're all
24 hours.
25 to 26, 27, 28 hours. They're not 15 hours. They're all above 25.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing none, I will thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to the report coming to the councilors. Okay, thank you. Thank you, excellent. Glasses on. Motion put forward by Councillor Hahn. The committee receive the following 2020 budget presentations and refer to staff for inclusion in the budget considerations, the Pelham Public Library Board. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. So the second presentation will be, I can't quite read that.
Ms. Maida, and she is present.
Madam Clerk will introduce her because I can't quite find that name. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, it's Ms. Maida from the Wayland Heights area, and she would like to present on the Wayland Heights playground.
Very good. That was a D. That's what it was. Okay.
Maida family.
Did they identify everyone or not?
Only the speakers.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, town staff, thank you for having us here today. My name is Mary Maida, and I'm one of the residents of Abbott Place, and I stand with you, 10 of our children from the street, and representing 5 families up here of some of our parents. So thank you for the opportunity to have us here today, and we want to speak with you about the Wayland Heights Park. As you all know, and you've probably been privy to all of the conversations that's been going on since November of last year. It's been a long, arduous process to get to where we are now, although we are very excited to see the progress being made. We are asking for your consideration and a request to introduce a play structure for budget dollars to be allocated towards that for the Wayland Heights Park. We sincerely appreciate the opportunity that was given to work with Stock and provide input in the community consultations. It's a great process, very exciting times, although at the end of the day, as you can see by the 10 children that are here, we've been in the neighborhood for 3.5, waving, 3 years or so. The kids are still don't have any play structures to play on. What we've seen at Wheeland is a slide, which the kids are excited about. However, some of our taller folks reach from head to toe on the slide in its entirety. So it's making for a little bit more challenging for some of our kids. At my count, we have 77 homes on Abbott Place. We have 25 children that are there full-time. We have 2 on the way, which is very exciting times for us, and we are a very tight-knit community. Mr. Mayor, you would have received the invitation to join us for our street party, our 3rd annual that happened. Unfortunately, we only got 2 hours in on the Sunday, and we got rained out, but it was short, but it was sweet. And we are very much looking forward to having a park, not just a park, but actually a playground for our children to play in. We did discuss in early days, I've been at all of the meetings thus far, looking at potentially fundraising for making a contribution to the park. I did look at some, as I'm a fundraiser by trade, I did look at some public funding opportunities, but because of the status of being in town, we don't qualify. Unfortunately, Jumpstart had a really great program, but it's not something that we can look at. And other funding looks at charitable giving, which is completely understandable. As a town, we're hoping that you can see fit to put in a budget, if there's any surplus this year or next, to look at some play structures. I took the opportunity to meet some of the parents that you can see standing here, who are very active in our community and engaged in what we all do, and make sure that our kids are well taken care of and safe. And we looked at what possibilities would be available for Wheeland and with the space that's there. I went to Henderson, who just installed the play structure at Heartland Forest, and spoke with one of their reps and had a custom site design with the schematics, which I have sent via email already for your information. Now, whether it will fit, I'm not sure 100%, but I did look at things that we are looking for. So what we're hoping for our children is somewhere for them to slide, which we have now, which is great, somewhere for them to climb, and some swings. That's the basis of childhood playground structures, and that's really what we're hoping for. When we did talk about fundraising, I do want to touch on that. We looked at community fundraising as well, and we did see some support, but we also saw that a lot of parents felt that we'd already paid for that, and so it was going to be a big divide. Like I said, Abbott Place has 77 homes on it. The park is located on Abbott, with Lookout going in, because Lookout, as I understand, has received a $75,000 directed donation for their play structure. We unfortunately have a divide in the neighborhood that is going to happen naturally. We're going to get directed donations, and it's essentially created a divide in our our donor pool. So for a very large area, it became a very, very small donation base, and a much smaller funding pool, and socioeconomic homes. So you're looking at the multi-million-dollar homes in Lookout, and we're primarily comprised of townhomes on our side. So not that that means anything necessarily, but as a professional fundraiser, without the opportunity to do a full feasibility study, which I unfortunately wouldn't have the time to volunteer to do, nor even professionally have the time to be hired to do at this moment, I couldn't truly give an honest opinion as to what we would be able to raise. But that being said, I do want to introduce some of these youngsters that are around the table, and some of them would like to speak because they are very entrepreneurial and philanthropic in their nature, and had some very good success this weekend, and would like to say a few words. Sydney?
So this weekend we did a lemonade stand to raise money for the park, you know, the youth, and how we can present, well, how we can give it to you. But we raised $90. A lot of people to just give donations, and but our neighborhood really wants more of this park, and I guess more park. We just really tried our best to get what we want.
Parents?
Just clarifying one point that Mary mentioned about the conflict of trying to do a fundraiser when parents already have the expectation. When most of the people purchased their homes on Abbott Place and the original design, when they're all being built and we all purchased new homes, the park was shown as part of that contract. So a lot of individuals believe it is already legally required for the park to be built and structure to be placed on there as part of the original agreement, and all the fees paid as part of all 77 lots. So that's still a point of
It's a point of contention, and it's something that we would definitely have to overcome. It's a very large obstacle. Speaking as a professional fundraiser again, that's a lot of legwork, it's a lot of documentation, it's a lot of explanation, and it's a lot of time. So it can be done, but it's very costly. And as a volunteer, it's just not possible. I apologize, but that's just not something that I can take on. As you can see, I've got my
And
hands full.
just clarifying that would be one avenue. The other avenue was just to explore what are the legal implications of the actual contract and what was expected originally. So
Right, of
that's the other half of what you want to.
Okay. That's your presentation?
Anybody else? Thank you for the opportunity.
So did
Okay,
you
Rob.
mention the cost?
Oh, yes,
So
I'm
to
sorry, I
ask-
did send the budget. Yes. Well, I mean, we'll
So
take as much as.
Mary's looked at a whole bunch of things. I mean, these things ranging, you spend $200,000 overnight on this stuff. And so this is what we came up with reasonable. $25,000 is a reasonable amount for park equipment. And so this is the best we can do for $25,000. So
And that includes $2,800 and just over $2,800 in HST, which if the town does do the purchase order, we wouldn't have to pay. So it's just over $22,000.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I think we have some beautiful parks in the town. They were all redone roughly 10 years ago. And I think to be equitable and fair, we should have something similar to, because right now, one place, it's just grass and stuff. Yeah, so like, you know, it's, you look around and you go, what happened? Like, so, and think we all know what happened, but how do we overcome it? So we have to find challenges. I know we're looking for efficiencies everywhere. I get that. But I think for that price, I mean, playgrounds, as we all know, start, you know, in the $50,000 and $60,000. So that's a pretty fair and reasonable price, and I think it's something that should be really considered through the capital.
And please note that that doesn't include the base. As we know, bases are typically another double of that. So given that Wayland is not complete as it stands, that may be something that can be implemented at this point to help with savings.
Thank you. Before we, if I can just get the Madame Director, where are we at that park right now? And did we not put in bases for additional, could you fill us in on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so the contractor should be out there today. I wasn't out there today.
Skid steer went by just as I was coming here.
Okay. Okay. They are finishing up over the next couple of weeks the Ben and Stock, the original. And for Lookout, the completion of Lookout with the playground equipment will be October 31st.
Okay.
For that, but the last date is October 31st.
Yes. And what does that include right now?
Included in Lookout?
Yes.
Basically the swings, slides, climbers,
Okay.
Trails.
oh yeah, well, the trails, the
Yes.
landscaping and
Yes,
the
yes.
underlay, everything, a complete park
Okay,
will be completed by October 31st.
okay, thank you for that. Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I know you asked a question about the base, and I have it written down. I just want to confirm and make sure the base should have been included, because we asked that question, and they said the base at both parks would be in place for future addition of playground equipment.
Yep.
So I want that,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a larger space, depending on the size of the equipment. For instance, the equipment that's being suggested here wouldn't fit in the space, the surface space that's there now. It would need to be enlarged. So a portion of it would cover, but it would definitely need to be enlarged, depending on the size of equipment you're putting in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you doing that?
yeah. The previous company, they did say that they were going to allow for swings and climbers, and the slide was already going to be there, part of the hill. I just want to make sure that the foundation is still there before we run into trouble next year and say, we're going to allow them to put in more playground equipment. Oh, by the way, we don't have no base. We just want to make sure now, while the work is still being done, that the base is suitable for climbers and swings as they provided.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe swings were included in that. Swings, it's a large area that you need to have for a surface area because of the swing. And correct me if I'm wrong, there's enough area for climbers, but it just depends on the type of climbers. So what would need to happen is when we would go out for an RFP, we would state the size of space that is existing, and that would have to be included, that, you know, it would be council's decision if that's the area, or if you would wanted to expand it to make it larger.
Yeah, I'm good. Just if we can get a copy of that drawing or that blueprint of the current foundation so we know moving ahead, I would just ask for that, please.
Councilor Court.
Yes, to the director, how much is the play equipment at Lookout Park, total cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is at $89,000, including the surface.
Okay. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, wouldn't you want 89,000?
Oh, I absolutely. I would take 200 and
I
I would
don't
spend
understand
it.
why we just paste and copy and put it over there and have two.
We don't, I don't have enough room, to be honest with you, depending on the size, because the park is much larger than the Wayland Heights size.
Okay.
So looking into and trying to keep this economical, I absolutely, I'm a dreamer. I'm a fundraiser. I'm a visionary. So I would take it to the moon, no problem. But I don't think that's realistic to ask for council. But this is just an idea of what would be suitable. That was a very reasonable cost that we felt was appropriate to present.
Thank you, Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the presentation. So Henderson, I love the fact that it's Canadian-made, Ontario. But did you check into any other, or you just kind of?
I did.
You did, and that was the best price kind of thing?
They were one of the best to work with. They had just done some really good work in the area, and we were originally looking at some accessible structures when I was looking at putting in a larger structure for Lookout before I understood that the donation was happening, and hoping for one cohesive fundraising effort ahead. We went down that path, but because Henderson was highly recommended and they were very good price points to work with, and was able to turn around quoting very quickly, that's who I decided to partake in. But I do have 2 or 3 other quotes.
Councillor Court.
Another question, there would be an install price too.
That includes the install, it does not include the base.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
so it's
Installation and
installed.
assembly.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we do have a couple of engineers in our midst, but we can't do it by
Yeah.
legalities.
Any other questions? No?
Sorry, I just want to add, a lot of us are aware that a lot of you weren't in council when the original donation from Mountain View, whatever, it was a large amount that's, magically disappeared or whatever, but, so we know it wasn't, it's gone now, so we're moving on, but we just had this party on the weekend, and there is still a ton more room in this park for base equipment, whatever, like a lot of untouched ground where the equipment hasn't, even disturbed the ground yet. So there should be plenty of room, based on what we could see there on the weekend anyway.
So if I can just piggyback on that with a comment on value engineering and trying to get the most for your money. In that area on Wheeling Heights, when Beanstalk did the original consultations, it showed everything, right? So we're looking at everything, the equipment, and what we ended up with is all these pathways because there's a lack of equipment. Just for clarity, when you look at it as a whole, that was fine. But when you're talking about value engineering and base and your cost of base, the entire neighborhood is covered in sidewalks that are maintained wonderfully by the city year-round. We have amazing sidewalks everywhere. Kids love them, use them every day, both sides of the street in some cases, one side others. We don't need pathways in that little park. Save your money on the pathways, put the base in, and put the equipment in, because you don't need to walk in circles around a small area when we have a beautiful kilometers of neighborhood to walk around. So just something to consider if you're considering the equipment and the base.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, our seniors.
Yes,
One
Councillor
final
Court.
question, the base, is it stone, rubber?
It's still fenced in, spending a lot of money on rental fence over the last month and a half. Don't know what's going on. Hopefully the contractor's covering the cost of that rental fence. Sitting there. But anyway, the base right now is a wood structure, is a composite wood.
Yes, and it's
Actually,
it's packed. Please.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The base is a engineered fiber, wood fiber. That's what it's called, actually, fibar, engineered wood fiber, 12 inches thick, packed down.
So to put this equipment, how many square feet do we need? 10 by 10, 20 by 20? And what is there now to the director?
Do you have that?
It's right here. You just press slide down, it should be there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is 64 by 30. What I would suggest, if I may, a climber, a portion of it could fit in where the surface is now. And I would say the swings, because it is a smaller area, could fit towards the back. there's an open space towards the back.
Or even to the left when you're looking at the
Correct.
the side.
Yeah.
So this was just the
So there
overall
is
space,
a-
but you can play
yeah.
with this however it fits best in that space.
It wouldn't look like this. You just separate them. Make it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what do we have there now? Do we have anything now as a base, or we're gonna construct that base? And if it's smaller, why can't we just go 64 by 30 now and save a little bit of money instead of having someone come out again twice? Is the base being built as we speak?
Through
You
you.
mentioned about a fence.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The base is basically there now. I think that they're just topping it off right now. But what would need to happen is if council decided to, I mean, I'm looking at this, you have to at least double, so 50, 60,000, more or less. Probably more would be nice. And we would tender it out and ask, we would tell them the sizes, tell them the equipment that we would like, no different than what we did for the one that's going in Lookout. And a lot of times, and making it accessible as well, a lot of times what the companies will do is see what they have in stock, and you can get better, more equipment for your price because they can.
So the question I'm just asking, so it's finished and there's a fence around it?
I clarified that from my looking outside the fence in. The base area is finished, but the existing area we're talking about with the fence would be expanded is 3-foot high weeds that is has been bush cut a couple of times. So I don't know what the finished product there is, whether you're sodding it or.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there was nothing, if council decided, no, we're not spending anymore, that area that is weeds right at the moment, that would be cut so that it would be grassed, basically, usable as an open space.
Yes, Council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there any possible way that we can get a suitable base put in now? Because if we wait till next year, we're gonna just disrupt all the current work. If there's new sod or anything in there, if we go and put in playground equipment next year. We can install the equipment next year, but if we can have that base finished off this year, somehow.
I suggest, if I may, I suggest that in order to do that, we would have to more or less commit to certain structures so that then we could go back. Because remember, the structure is not near the cost of the base. Is that correct?
We roughly say it's 50%. If you spend 30,000 on a structure, it's 30,000 to put in a base.
I see. Oh, it's about the same then. Okay.
Yeah, can I just say this? The base, if you put in a base, the base has to come out because they concrete everything in. And then they put the base back in. So just keep that in mind.
Oh, so the base is not the concrete structure, it's gonna hold it.
Correct. So they,
I'm thinking the base was the concrete.
no, so they would remove everything, install, and then they would repack, pack everything
All right.
over again.
Oh,
So, I'm all about efficiencies as well, but the reality, what you have here and to date is you hired a natural playground company to come in and do landscaping at a very high price. So it is almost my recommendation, and I'm all about efficiencies as well. While we're at it, it's time to maybe pull the trigger and get some quotes, so we're comparing apples to apples, and we can go back to Beanstalk and say, hey, this is what we got. We might just want to finish off that contract, and then look at possibly next year taking ground with a new company that is an actual landscaping company that maybe potentially could save you more money than Beanstalk, because Beanstalk, I mean, for what they built and what we got, is we just got landscaping, and they do much, much more. We didn't actually get to see what they can do in full potential. So, it might be, this may not be a sit on wait, this may be a start to research now and get quotes. And you're right, if they're currently there and they have the machinery there, they might be more than willing to put that add-on at a reasonable price. They're a very reasonable company, they've worked well with us. And so, you know, rather than sitting back and watching and waiting, maybe this is something we should, you know, try to work on now, sooner than later, before they pull out and take that fence down. And then that way we have proper quotes. I mean, we're talking about efficiencies and getting tendered quotes from other people. Yeah, well, that's where we have to go. So, yeah, let's look at other companies, but also let's see what they have to offer as well.
Oh, so we do have to keep in mind that this is a 2020 as opposed to 3 weeks down the road, okay? So this is a 2020 budget request, and now all of a sudden we seem to have morphed, but,
Well, hey, having said that.
yes.
All of us got emails in 2015 saying the park was going in.
Those parts should have been in 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to talk timelines, we'll talk timelines all day.
Well-
But that's where we're at, so.
Okay. Yeah, well, myself, unless someone is going to suggest anything else, I think we'll take your budget request, and I can't, unless I'm wrong, and there's money to be had, I would think that we're gonna have to go with your budget request, and let's face it, the guys there with a skid steer, it doesn't take much to transport a skid steer in and do the thing. I think the big thing is, let's get this budget request looked at, and then go by there, put out RFPs, for whatever base it takes. I mean, it is a very modest request, that's for sure. Okay, and I think I can speak for the council that it's going to be, it's going to be looked at very favorably. It's more than fair. And like I said, as far as getting the guy back there in the spring, boom, we can do that, and away we go. That's my solution. Is the rest of the council? Let's start. Go ahead. Go.
You, Mr. Mayor. Now, I just looked back over here too. I have a note here saying that, and this question was the Director of Finance, that there's going to be some money coming available at the end of December for parks.
I thought that if I remember that same conversation, that we were going to have a surplus coming in at the end of the year, and I believe you also at that time suggested that it should go to parks. That's how I thought it was. And Madam Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The goal for us this year, we're working towards a positive cash balance. So that's a little bit different. That's to, we've been working towards replenishing some of the cash that has been spent internally. So that's what it's positive cash balance. So that's a little bit different. So I think here, what the purpose for tonight is, it's to hear the information. We are preparing capital budget requests, and we'll put this request on the list. And then council, when you go through your, budget review of the capital item line by line, which is what you did last year, and I'm assuming you'll do the same thing this year, that you'll put that as one of the considerations. And it's wonderful that everyone came out along with the children to express what your priority is. So thank you.
Excellent. Yes. Any other comments, council?
So if you don't have any money, I suggest maybe the CAO, debt financing, 5 years, $2,500 a year, 10 years, 10 years, $2,500 a year, 5 years, $5,000 a year. We're having to do that. I just borrowed $87 million for the university because they're throwing so much pressure on us for building student residence in their neighborhood, and we're debt financing it. Interest rates are at an all-time low, so our kids are getting older. John is 4 years older than when these parks were supposed to be put in, so the sooner rather than later would be great. But
Okay.
I'm sure that's not normal practice for such a small amount, but if it was to be done, it'd be a rounding error on your budget exercise.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
So if you do happen to find any budget this year, we would sincerely appreciate it, and I think they can move it fairly quickly and get it in, probably in a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, like I say, thank you for your presentation, and it's more than a fair request, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Excellent. Motion put forward by Councillor Wink That committee received the following written correspondence and refer to staff for inclusion in the budget considerations, a Wayland Heights Park. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, third. Nope. Oh, so I guess.
No, I'm just gonna ask if there's anybody else.
Yeah, so that is the end of the ones we have listed, but is there any other person present who would like to make a presentation to the Budget Committee? Oh, okay. Okay, not seeing any, once, twice, 3 times. So we'll assume that there is no one else that wants to make a presentation. So that is the end of this budget presentation. Closed session.
No, committee input on the 2020 budget.
Oh, so then we will now have the committee input on the 2020 budget.
If there's anything from around the table.
And is that anything from around the table? Councilor Wink.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we've talked about this quite a bit at the beginning of the year and looking at the hockey tournament that was at the MCC this past weekend. There was no basketball going on and the parking lot was jammed again. And it might be appropriate to look at taking part of Lot 4. We've talked about half of that at this point in time and installing a parking lot to augment what we have at the MCC.
If I can refresh my memory with the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens, where are we on the parking facilities at the MCC?
Mr. Mayor, through you, so we presented a report back in the spring, providing some options for parking. My recollection is at that time, council did not make a decision, wanting to see what the site plan for the medical center would be, and the shared kind of parking agreement and access agreement associated with that. And then also since that time, I've been asked to do a report on the Werner and bring that forward to you. So that will be the second meeting in October. That report is coming in terms of the Werner and options around that. So at this point in time, no decision has been made by council with respect to parking. I believe that Part 4 that Councillor Wink is referring to has been taken off the market, and so it currently is just sitting there at the moment.
So I'm realizing maybe there's only so much you can say, but the medical center, is that dead in the water, or how would you describe that project?
Mr. Mayor, through you, it's moving very slowly.
Okay.
The Director of Corporate Services and myself met with the proponent probably in June, end of May, beginning of June. They indicated that they had some preliminary plans. We were working on a access and parking agreement. They wanted some changes to that. That raised some concerns with us in terms of what their ultimate plans are, and we haven't heard back from them.
Excellent. So, because if that development would have taken place, or does indeed take place, is it 132 parking spots there? Do you remember? Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
I don't believe it was 132. I think it was somewhere in the order of 90.
I see. Okay.
My recollection is close, but let's say 90 to 100.
Okay.
And then, so that would be spots that would be available based on the purchase and sale agreement that was entered into. One of the conditions was that they would be able to have shared parking opportunities.
Okay, thank you for that. So Councillor, again, again?
So even
Even with that 90, it's still insufficient. So the reason why we took part 4 off of the market was to give us the option of doing future parking. I'm saying half at this point on the assumption that the health center is going to go through and we have the ability of 90 parking spots. If that's dead in the water and we can't utilize that property, we pretty much have to go forward with entire part 4 for parking.
Now, while you were talking, I thought that we actually had a report from staff about the additional parking, possibly either on the west side that maybe isn't, but on the north side where those doors are. I thought maybe we were going to have a report come back about utilizing some of that. Is that, am I wrong on that?
I had asked for that because through you, Mr. Mayor, at one point I had asked the feasibility of, and we had talked about this right across the road from Wellspring, basically, and having angled parking or moving back the sidewalk or removing some trees to allow for more parking, because we had that discussion following an accessibility presentation to come in and ask specifically for more handicap stalls, and in order to make that happen, perhaps we could open this up, and I haven't heard back on that.
Okay, so that hasn't, back to the director?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, the issue around additional accessible parking, there will be a report coming to you on that again in October. That's when it's targeted. Certainly with respect to what is available on street and signage for on-street parking, that was one of the things that we had chatted about, and whether or not we reconfigure the street in terms of taking out the curb and the landscaping and installing some form of parking. That of course would have to be a budget item. We haven't yet come back. That was going to be when we come back with the whole, I think, report on the parking. That would be one of the things that we would include. It was what Councillor Hahn had indicated we look at when we last talked about that.
And if I could ask your opinion on Councillor Winks, if we were to, if this council decided to cut parcel 4 in half for now, would that affect its saleability or its marketability, I suppose is what I'm saying? Or how would you, if we decide not to do all of it, but just half of it, but does that restrict our options on the other half?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, I think what we looked at with respect to part 4 was we had presented 2 options. One was developing the site in its entirety for parking, and one was to just provide parking on kind of the Rice Road frontage and leaving that piece that fronts onto Summersides Boulevard as that being the more kind of desirable piece in terms of land value for sale purposes. That the Rice Road piece has kind of a less of a value. So those were some of the considerations that we had looked at when we presented those 2 options with respect to part 4. There is the ability to access the piece on Rice Road through kind of an internal road or driveway linking from the community center, so that is possible, and retaining the frontage on Summersides for future sale.
So then, Councilor Wink, what you're asking for is perhaps a feasibility study, or at least to see what the cost of that would be?
Well, at the end of the day, we need more parking.
Yeah.
And whether we carve it on the street or we pave the Warnor or whatever, we need parking spaces, and the cost of that has to be built in the 2020 budget.
Okay, excellent. Any other comments? Councilor Trophy?
Yeah, so this is totally new, so that's all done, that one?
Yep.
So I'm looking, and I'm not sure if this is the correct time or not, but to put in the budget, a possible bylaw officer that could be required to enforce any new cannabis-related bylaws that could come in place. So if we can look into that into the budget, and also even recouping that money from the cannabis producers. But I want to make sure it's put in somewhere along there that we could need additional staff.
We will happily take that under advisement for presentation to you in due course.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Any other ideas? Not seeing any. Then we will probably have a piece of paper to read.
The next thing is the closed session.
Yes, okay. So that will conclude the open session of this meeting. And Council Wink has put forward the motion that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following pursuant to Section 239(2)E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, and Section 239(2)F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. One item. File number LO2-17-2019. All those in favor of this motion? All those opposed? So we will now move into closed session.